Just moments ago, according to the dramatic account presented in this video, a major rupture shook the very center of Buckingham Palace and changed the internal balance of the British monarchy. What may appear from the outside to be a world of ceremonial grace, restrained smiles, and carefully managed diplomacy is instead portrayed here as the setting for a fierce and deeply strategic internal struggle. The narrator frames the situation not as a minor disagreement within the royal household, but as a calculated purge of influence. At the center of this alleged turning point stands Prince William, who is said to have taken decisive action against what the video describes as a long-developing effort to bring Queen Consort Camilla's son, Tom Parker Bowles, closer to official royal life. In the version of events described by the transcript, William is portrayed as having acted with finality, removing Tom from every meaningful royal association and making clear that no informal access, symbolic role, or implied status would be tolerated any longer. The script insists that this was not a soft internal correction or a polite family request, but rather a deliberate and irreversible exclusion from the monarchy's inner circle. Yet the video places just as much emphasis on Princess Anne as it does on William. It presents Anne not merely as a supporting figure, but as the silent force who made the entire move possible through discipline, intelligence, and ruthless clarity. According to the narrative, Anne allegedly discovered and destroyed a cache of sensitive documents that outlined a hidden campaign designed to elevate Camilla's son into a more prominent royal position. These papers are described as far more than ordinary files. The script characterizes them as strategic blueprints containing media planning, financial maneuvering, and communication schemes intended to normalize Tom's presence within royal settings. The video's argument is that Anne understood the danger these papers posed, not only because of what they revealed, but because of the leverage they created. By destroying them, the transcript suggests she prevented the documents from ever being used for blackmail, scandal, or internal warfare. The story then shifts to the broader question of authority. Why William and why now? The transcript presents him not as a passive heir waiting quietly in line, but as the active operational center of the modern monarchy. In this telling, the Prince of Wales is the one who controls access, presence, optics, and legitimacy. The monarch may wear the crown, but the heir manages much of the practical machinery that determines who appears in official spaces, who attends major state occasions, and who receives the subtle endorsement that comes from standing near royal power. The alleged removal of Tom is therefore framed as a message not just to one individual, but to anyone who might mistake proximity for inheritance. The video claims that for months the public had been witnessing a slow, quiet campaign of normalization. It points to seemingly small signs, seating arrangements, charity appearances, strategic photographs, and carefully framed public moments, as evidence that Tom was being moved closer and closer to the symbolic heart of royal life. According to the transcript, this was never intended to happen overnight. Instead, it was supposedly a gradual conditioning process designed to make the public accept someone without royal blood as part of the monarchy's visible future. What the alleged planners failed to anticipate, the narrator says, was the alliance between William and Anne. Princess Anne is depicted throughout the transcript as the embodiment of royal discipline, duty, and institutional memory. The video describes her as someone shaped by the values of Queen Elizabeth II and committed not to celebrity, influence, or popularity, but to service and continuity. In that worldview, the monarchy is not a modern branding enterprise open to reinvention by public relations methods. It is an inherited institution, built on bloodline, sacrifice, and long years of obligation. For that reason, the video claims that Anne viewed any attempt to promote an outsider into royal symbolism as not merely inappropriate, but as a direct violation of the institution she had spent her life defending. The alleged conflict is said to have become unmistakable during a memorial ceremony at Westminster Abbey. The transcript describes this as the moment when the quiet tension became visible in physical form. Anne, who had long occupied a place of honor based on both bloodline and lifetime service, is said to have arrived expecting her traditional front row seat. Instead, according to the narrative, she found Tom Parker Bowles seated there. The moment is presented not as a logistical mistake, but as a calculated test, an effort to force both the family and the public to accept a new visual order in which Camilla's son could be seen occupying space normally reserved for senior royals. The power of that scene, as the video tells it, came not from loud confrontation but from restraint. Anne did not object publicly. She did not create a scandal in the Abbey. She simply took the lesser seat assigned to her and maintained her composure. But the transcript frames that silence as the moment the battle lines were fully drawn. The real significance was not the chair itself, but what it represented, a symbolic displacement of bloodline by invitation, of inherited duty by managed visibility. In the logic of the video, this was the instant when Anne understood the campaign had crossed a line that could no longer be ignored. Later, at the reception that followed, the video claims the rivalry moved from symbolism into direct personal exchange. Under the chandeliers and in the controlled elegance of the gathering, Camilla is said to have approached Anne with a polished, almost triumphant calm. What followed, according to the transcript, was a pointed remark suggesting that Anne should step back and make room for a new generation of representatives. The statement, as presented by the narrator, was less about age than about replacement. It was portrayed as a polished but unmistakable attempt to declare the old order obsolete and clear a path for a different center of influence. Anne's answer, in the video's retelling, became the defining line of the entire saga. She allegedly responded that the new generation of the royal family is born in the palace, not invited into it. That sentence is presented as devastating because it cut past all media strategy and all social maneuvering to the heart of the issue: legitimacy. The transcript treats that moment as the collapse of pretense. From then on, the struggle was no longer hidden behind ceremony. It had become an open contest over what the monarchy fundamentally is, who belongs within it, and whether status can be manufactured through optics. The video then argues that after this exchange, the conflict moved underground and became more vicious. No longer relying only on symbolism or placement, Camilla is portrayed as having turned toward the one arena she could more directly influence: communications. The transcript alleges that whispers began appearing through anonymous sources, casting doubt on Anne's charitable work and suggesting mismanagement or outdated practices. This, according to the video, was intended to weaken Anne's moral authority and force her onto the defensive, while clearing a smoother path for Tom's rise. It is described as a quiet smear campaign designed to undermine the old guard without open confrontation. Anne, however, is portrayed as someone who does not panic or respond impulsively. In the transcript's dramatic language, she moves like an intelligent strategist, relying on long-built loyalty networks inside the palace. Veteran aides, archivists, secretaries, and institutional insiders are said to have helped her trace the campaign back to its source. Through those channels, the video claims Anne obtained the secret files at the center of the story. These documents allegedly exposed how communication budgets and royal resources were being redirected to construct a carefully managed public image for Tom Parker Bowles, while marginalizing Anne in official narratives. The transcript spends considerable time emphasizing the importance of documents within royal history. It argues that in institutions built on secrecy, precedent, and symbolism, paper trails are never neutral. Letters, ledgers, memoranda, and internal correspondences can shape succession, alter reputations, and arm rivals with leverage. In this framing, the files were not merely embarrassing records, they were weapons. That is why the narrator treats Anne's alleged possession of them as such a critical turning point. She had in her hands material that could have exploded into a global scandal, publicly humiliated the queen consort, and possibly damaged the monarchy itself. Yet the video insists Anne did not choose exposure. She supposedly chose protection. Instead of releasing the documents or weaponizing them through the press, Anne is said to have read them, absorbed what they revealed, and then made a decision rooted in institutional survival rather than personal revenge. The transcript presents this as the defining act of her character. If the papers had become public, the entire monarchy could have suffered a collapse of trust. If she had kept them, they might have fueled endless cycles of extortion, denial, and suspicion. By burning them, the narrator argues, Anne destroyed not the truth, but the machinery of manipulation surrounding it. That act of burning is presented almost ceremonially in the transcript. Anne is said to have taken the files to the fireplace in her private study and watched the plans, schemes, and ledgers blacken into ash. The symbolism is unmistakable: ambition consumed by flame, leverage reduced to nothing, and a dangerous internal campaign stripped of its physical evidence. But crucially, the video stresses that while the paper trail disappeared, the knowledge remained. Anne no longer possessed documents that could be leaked or stolen, yet she still knew what they had contained. In this version of events, that knowledge became more powerful than the files themselves because it could guide action without endangering the institution. The next phase of the story takes Anne into direct confrontation with Camilla. According to the transcript, Anne visited Clarence's house without warning and faced the queen consort privately. There was no performance for the press, no public accusation, and no dramatic scene for outsiders. Instead, Anne allegedly recited the contents of the destroyed files point by point, unauthorized spending, manipulated media arrangements, and coordinated efforts to sideline her while advancing Tom. Camilla, the video suggests, expected blackmail or exposure. What she received instead was something more psychologically crushing: the information that the evidence was already gone and could no longer be used by anyone. In that telling, Anne's message was chillingly simple. Camilla would not be publicly exposed because Anne had burned every page in order to protect the crown and the king. Yet Anne also made clear that the campaign was over and that Prince William had been fully informed. This is the moment the transcript identifies as the handoff from intelligence to enforcement. Anne had neutralized the danger, removed the possibility of public scandal, and cleared the ground. What remained was for William to act with the institutional authority of the heir and make the consequences official. The setting then shifts to Buckingham Palace, where the video imagines an emergency high-level council taking place behind closed doors. In a secure, wood-paneled chamber, senior advisors, legal minds, protocol experts, Anne, William, and King Charles are said to have gathered in an atmosphere thick with tension. William, according to the transcript, did not present a suggestion for discussion. He placed a decree on the table. The document allegedly ended Tom Parker Bowles's involvement in all official royal duties, events, symbolic functions, and state-linked charitable activities. It also restructured communications oversight so that the Queen Consort's office could no longer shape access or visibility in the same way. The severity of William's alleged move is a central part of the transcript's drama. Tom would no longer be featured in official messaging, quietly endorsed through appearances, or permitted to hover near the edges of royal legitimacy. Any organization trying to exploit his presence as though it carried royal approval would be corrected. Communication teams and budgets would fall under tighter supervision. In the video's telling, William did not just remove a person, he dismantled an entire infrastructure of influence. Every mechanism that had allegedly been built to elevate Tom was cut away with administrative precision. The transcript also places heavy emotional weight on King Charles during this scene. He is portrayed as deeply conflicted, a husband who had fought for Camilla's acceptance, but also a sovereign who understood that the institution could not afford further damage. The story implies that Charles recognized William's reasoning, even if it came at personal cost. In the silent exchange between father and son, the narrator sees a transfer of operational authority. Charles does not intervene. He does not reverse the decision. Instead, he is described as yielding with a quiet nod, allowing William to carry out what the video frames as a necessary defense of the monarchy. Once William signs the decree, the transcript describes the sound of pen on parchment as the symbolic end of the struggle. From that moment forward, the purge is total. Palace departments are instructed to follow the new rules. Staff are warned that any attempt to reinsert Tom into royal communications will have consequences. William is portrayed as having crossed a threshold, from popular prince to enforcer of dynastic boundaries. The video repeatedly insists that this is not a petty family disagreement but an act of institutional preservation. In its view, if royal identity begins to look transferable through marriage, association, or media engineering, the monarchy's very foundation starts to weaken. From there, the narrative returns to Clarence House and the aftermath for Camilla. The place that once functioned, in the transcript's telling, as a strategic center of influence becomes suddenly still and cold. Phones stop ringing, media calendars collapse, and carefully laid plans vanish. The video uses the language of aristocratic isolation to describe what happens next. No one publicly humiliates Camilla, no one stages open rebellion. Instead, the palace subjects her to the oldest form of elite punishment, polite exclusion. She remains in the room, but no longer at the controls. She retains status, but loses reach. She remains visible, but not influential. For someone portrayed as a long-game strategist, that loss of soft power is depicted as devastating. The oversight structures created by William and supported by Anne now stand between Camilla and the communications machinery she once allegedly influenced. Aides once loyal to her are reassigned or subordinated elsewhere. Statements, schedules, appearances, and initiatives can no longer be quietly shaped without approval from those who orchestrated her defeat. The video's suggestion is that this is a more painful outcome than public scandal because it leaves Camilla crowned but contained, still bearing title, but no longer able to redirect the flow of power around her. Tom, in the transcript, suffers even more dramatically. Only weeks earlier, he is described as the beneficiary of a manufactured narrative that cast him as modern, approachable, and increasingly relevant. After William's decree, that narrative collapses overnight. The video depicts him as becoming socially radioactive within elite circles. Invitations dry up, charity boards retreat. High society figures who once welcomed him suddenly develop distance. The broader aristocratic ecosystem, as the narrator presents it, respects only active power. Once the prince has removed his backing, formal or informal, Tom loses the protective aura that made his presence useful to others. This shift, the video argues, affects not only Tom but everyone around the queen consort. Courtiers, staff, aristocrats, and insiders quickly recognize where the monarchy's operational future now lies. Conversation changes. Deference cools. Favors disappear. Camilla, once able to shape tone and direction in subtler ways, finds rooms becoming polite but impenetrable. Even the king cannot rescue her from this outcome, according to the transcript, because to reverse William's decision would risk a far more explosive rupture between sovereign and heir. The result is a queen consort isolated not by scandal, but by recognition that the future belongs elsewhere. The script then widens its lens and presents the entire episode as the beginning of a new era. What happened, it argues, was not merely a clash over seating, visibility, or personal ambition. It was a decisive reassertion of principle. The monarchy, in this narrative, came close to being reshaped by image management and informal influence. Instead, William and Anne are portrayed as having drawn a hard line. The institution may adapt, modernize, and streamline, but it will not, according to the video's philosophy, surrender its defining basis of legitimacy. That basis is presented in one word: bloodline. The alliance between Anne and William is treated as the heart of the story. Anne represents memory, discipline, precedent, and uncompromising duty. William represents enforcement, future authority, and the willingness to act. Together, the transcript suggests, they formed a protective barrier around the throne. Anne gathered the intelligence and neutralized the danger. William translated that knowledge into binding institutional action. The video treats them as two generations of the same instinct, the belief that monarchy survives only when its inner boundaries are guarded against personal ambition, no matter how polished or carefully marketed that ambition may be. In the final philosophical turn, the transcript contrasts ambition with duty. Ambition, it says, can dress itself elegantly, smile for cameras, and move quietly through powerful rooms, but it remains fragile. Under pressure, it cracks. Duty, by contrast, is heavy, silent, and often thankless, but enduring. Within the logic of the script, Anne proves that real power often acts in silence, protecting the institution without seeking applause. William proves that true leadership sometimes requires painful decisions, even when the conflict touches one's own family. Together, they are said to have secured the monarchy's future by reminding everyone that royal standing cannot be manufactured through public relations or borrowed through marriage. And so the video closes by presenting this alleged internal struggle as a defining chapter in modern royal history. The palace, in its telling, has shut its doors against intrusion. The bloodline remains protected. The future has been clarified. Whether one sees William's actions as necessary strength, Anne's destruction of the files as brilliant protection, or Camilla as a player who lost a dangerous game, the transcript leaves its audience with a stark conclusion. Beneath the formality of crowns, ceremony, and polished appearances lies a world governed by loyalty, control, lineage, and survival. In that world, the crown may symbolize continuity, but only those willing to defend its boundaries determine how that continuity endures.